Welcome back to Friar Talk, everyone. Today, we haven't recorded in a little bit. We went live, I feel like, a couple weeks ago. But season's starting to pick up. We got some trade rumors. We got a video coming out today, got a video coming out tomorrow. I'm going to go live before the opening day game. Isaac, I'm assuming you're working. Chase might be around. We'll see. But I'll at least go live for like an hour, kind of do a season prediction thing there. So we got some content coming up. Hopefully, we'll do like a regular live stream, like maybe once a week or something when the season starts out. But we do have some trade rumors, and I feel like Dylan Cease, not just in the Padres circle, but overall MLB circle, he has been the guy that everyone wants to talk about. Are the Padres going to trade him? Is Dylan Cease going to be in a different uniform? Been the biggest question mark, I feel like, of the last month or so, just with free agency kind of done now. But you look at it, and on one hand, I see a lot of Padres fans that are like, we cannot trade Dylan Cease. Very reluctant to do it. You have the Yu Darvish injury, so you have uncertainty there. You have Musgrove that's not going to be back till best case scenario really late in the regular season. You're like, okay, the starting pitching it's a little thin, right? To start the year, the Padres are probably going to have, I mean, two guys that are of the three guys that are that are vying for a fifth spot. Now there's another guy that's going to start that. So you have two guys you're not very like confident in to start the year. However, I will say, and I don't know how you feel about this, Isaac. Obviously, with elbow tightness, it's always concerning. But the Padres have been more, they've been more like, oh, it's day to day. It's not as big of a thing. And I'll say tomorrow too, because we already recorded a video for tomorrow. But I said, like, dude, it's a little different than like Musgrove last year, where he's like not going to pitch for like a week, not going to pitch for 2 weeks, and it was clearly a lot longer of a thing. Where Darvish, at least what Mike Schultz said, was like, yeah, we don't expect it to be super serious. Hopefully that's the case. Knock on wood, right? But with that said, Dylan Cease is getting thrown in all these trade rumors. Now, before you even talk about it, if the Padres were to trade Dylan Cease, they would need to have a corresponding move. That's the first thing. They would have to have another starter come in. You're not going to rock in the season with Michael King and Pivetta, and that like those are your two established starters, and that's it. You cannot do that. If you're a team that has playoff World Series aspirations, you cannot make that move. So, with that said, if the Padres are going to make a move, number one thing is they have to go and get another starter simultaneously to trading Dylan Cease. Now, the reason why I like the idea of trading Dylan Cease, I'm not saying it has to happen. Dylan Cease is on a 1-year contract, $14 million this year, or a little over $14 million. It's not likely that the Padres are going to bring him back next year. Now, Spot Track, I think it is, has him at like 5 years, $105 million, like a little bit more than the Musgrove deal. Dude, he's getting 5 for $150. Isaac, you agree with that, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I think it's going to be more.
yeah, like he's going to get a lot. If you look at the pitching contracts from this season, I think that's a huge underestimate. Like 5 for 150 is probably where it's going to start at, and there's going to be multiple teams that are willing to give him that. So, you look at it. Padres, they went and traded for him last year, right? Last offseason. They didn't trade that much for him. They really didn't. And if you look at the returns
They
so far,
lost nothing.
it's who? Iriarte and Thorpe, right? Those are the two guys I want to say. Thorpe is all banged up. Iriarte didn't look that great last year after having a big year in the farm system in 23, and like a good spring training stuff. It's like not like a super high end starter. It looks like the Padres are gaining in that deal, right? Then we look at last year's season for Dylan Cease, obviously famously through the no, right? And I'll pull up his baseball savant right here so we can all take a little peek at it. But we're looking at him right here. He had a great year. No way around it. He had one of his best years. You look at 2022 and you look at 2024, and he had, around a 1.1 whip both these years. He had a 2.2 ERA that season. Ridiculous. He threw a little bit more innings this year. 220 plus strikeouts, 33 game pitched, mid-3s ERA, right? Really good. However, if I'm gonna talk about why I think they should trade Dylan Cease, is that, dude, the guy's inconsistent. Like everyone that watched last season, you saw it. He would go through these stretches where he was unhittable. Then he would really struggle. And come playoff time, he was really struggling. And he was bad. There's no way to beat around it. Like, he was a bad pitcher in the playoffs. He was actually horrendously bad. And he's one of the biggest reasons the Padres didn't beat the Dodgers. Like, that's a fact. Now, it's a tough lineup to go against. It's 2 games, right? He pitched on little rest for game 4. Either way, that's what happened. Dylan Cease is just streaky, though. Throughout the season, really high highs, really low lows. Now, you can kind of flip side that and say, well, dude, if he comes in the playoffs and he's shoving, he's going to be lights out. And I think that's a fair take. However, is it worth it for the Padres? This is the number one question, and this is what I'll ask you, Isaac, to kind of as we dive into it. Is it worth it for the Padres to put all the eggs into? We get Dylan Cease for 1 year, or do they trade him at probably a premium of prospect capital than they got last year? I think that would be the expectations. He's coming off a great year, whereas where they traded for him, they were trading for a guy that he was coming off a down year for him on the White Sox in 23. Do they put all their eggs in the one basket on we're gonna ride 1 year with Dylan Cease, or do they move him, make some corresponding moves, maybe drop the rotation a little bit, but try to improve the future and improve the window a little bit of this team? Because those are the two options I see. You go and trade him for some prospect capital, maybe flip some of that prospect capital and go and get a guy, right? We've seen so many deals like this, like we saw it with Juan Soto and Dylan Cease. That way, they do that, they adjust, they make the rotation work out a little bit better. They are obviously just signed Pivetta to a multi-year deal, so I don't know, dude. What do you think? Do you think that trading Dylan Cease makes sense for the Padres?
I mean, yeah, it makes sense. The only way it makes sense, it's kind of like last year where when, sorry if I'm not really looking at the camera too much, I'm trying to find numbers. Um, it only makes sense if you're gonna make a corresponding move. Whereas last year, like if you guys remember, we were saying, if you're gonna trade Soto, it's got to be for pitching, but you also got to figure out what you're gonna do in the corner outfield spot. We didn't think Profar was gonna be that good. He ended up being really good. Um, So that ended up working out really well for them. But you bring up the inconsistencies of Dylan Cease. I'm gonna pull up some more numbers from Baseball Savant. And I'm gonna pull up his numbers from this year showing the monthly splits. So give me 1 second. Because honestly, it's like 3 months where you got pretty good production, 3 months where you got pretty bad production. So if you guys see, let's see, yeah, in April, made 5 starts, 2.61 ERA, was really good, 0.87 whip. In May, a 4 ERA, 1 whip, still not bad. In June, a 4.94 ERA. July, 2.35 ERA. This is around the time, I believe he threw the no-hitter in July, I want to say. Is that right, Matt? Against the Nationals?
Yeah, I think around then. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so he threw it in July, I want to say. He had a really good month in July. August, 4.43. September, 2.97. So you get 3 months of pretty, that's back end rotation production, and you get 3 months of ace, I would say ace production. Um, so I mean, he had a pretty solid year. It's just, it's exactly like Blake Snell, and I remember we were talking about that a lot last year. We were saying like, Blake Snell's the kind of guy where you're going to get 3 months of horrible production, 3 months of good production, and so it worked out. However, there's something deeper that doesn't really get talked about as much, and it's his postseason numbers. So I'm going to pull those up too. And as you can see, Matt, you're right. Yeah, he costed us the NLDS, and I hate to be that guy because I don't want to be that guy to say that one guy kind of cost you a playoff series, but the numbers speak for themselves. He made 2 starts against the Dodgers. He had a 14 ERA in those starts. He only pitched 5 innings. I want to say he had like a 5.5 K per or based on balls per nine. So it just was really, really, really bad. For those of you who were there, game 4, we suffered in solidarity when he pitched. It was really, really bad. And I mean, he allowed a lot of home runs, man. It just, we were talking about one of the games specifically where they were, I want to say, Matt, how much were they up by 3?
Against the
And
one
then,
where the 3-run shot, game 1.
yeah,
I think it was maybe 2. I think it
yeah,
was 2-0 to start, like real quick, and then he had.
exactly. Manny hit a home run. That's right. Manny hit a home run, and then Dylan Cease. You guys know what happened. It was a really rough start for Dylan Cease, and so we expected him. Of course, it was on short rest, kind of cut on some slack a little bit, but on short rest, he goes into Petco Park against the bullpen. Keep that in mind. I want to say it was a bullpen game for the Dodgers, and it was 8-0. Of course, he can't win without putting up runs, but it's kind of hard to feel motivated or feel good about it when you're down so early in the game and crowd's kind of out of it. It was tough. It was a really rough game. So um, you not only have some inconsistency with Dylan Cease, you have some postseason struggles for Dylan Cease, and I'm not gonna hold that against him forever. I mean, I don't think that defines a pitcher's career or a pitcher postseason career. I think he has time to kind of make up for it. Of course, I don't know if it's going to be with the Padres this year. The thing with Dylan Cease is that he's on a 1 year deal right now. He's got 1 year left on his contract, so you're looking at a team that it it's kind of looking kind of murky. Darvish has elbow inflammation. He's also getting older. Joe Musgrove is going to be coming off Tommy John next year. Michael King, I think Michael King, he's also on a 1 year deal. And then you got Nick Pivetta. So those are two guys that you need to resign. I know probably a good amount of you would rather resign Dylan Cease. However, you got to look at it from a business perspective, right? Michael King, he had a great year last year. He has great stuff. Amazing year last year. Really, there was only one time where I could think of where I was like, that was a bad start. And it was unfortunately against the Dodgers when at the time he had only allowed one run and then he allowed a grand slam to Teoscar Hernandez. And honestly, he was pitching a pretty good game up to that point. But he had a really good start against the Braves. I mean, he was fantastic for a good majority of the year.
That Brave start was absurd.
Phenomenal. It was a phenomenal start. I'm gonna try and pull up his baseball slot, see if we can see his splits.
Well, also, but with what you're saying, it's like the other thing too is like think about the money, guys. I know that deal says like, oh, so it says it. So Spotrac's estimates are 5 years, like 105 million for Dylan Cease, and for Michael King, they're 4 years, 71 million. I think those are insanely low estimates for what these guys are going to end up getting. I think we're going to see a similar deal for Michael King at this point because Michael King just finished last year with a sub-3 ERA. If he does that again, he's going to make more money. Same thing with Dylan Cease, right? If he has another good year, he's going to make more money. With Dylan Cease, I think it's like five. My guess is just like they're both going to get 5 year deals, right? We see 5 and 6 year deals for older pitchers all the time. They're both around 30, right around 30, 29, I think, for maybe both of them.
29, yeah.
I think Michael King's going to get a 5 year, $100 million deal, and I think Dylan Cease is going to get a 5 year, $150 million deal. I'd rather pay Michael King. I'd rather pay Michael King less. Yes, he doesn't have like, the longevity of his career that Dylan Cease has had, but Michael King is their number one guy. I think there's a reason for that. I think the team is telling you like, yeah, Michael King is our guy, is more of our guy than Dylan Cease is. And maybe it's not that deep, right? Maybe it's not that serious, but I feel like he was better last year. Now, Dylan Cease, we were talking about this before we got on. Dylan Cease was 4th in Cy Young, and Michael King was 7th. Michael King had significantly better numbers, but he didn't throw a no-no, so that's the difference there.
Sure.
The other thing is, and I don't have the numbers to back this up. I've always just felt like this though. Dylan Cease is primarily a 2-pitch pitcher, right? He throws the 4-seamer and the slider 86% of the time. Michael King has 4 pitches. He throws pretty evenly, and then he mixes in a slider. He throws the sinker 28% of the time, the changeup 25%, the 4-seamer 24%, and the sweeper 18%, along with the slider for 6%. He has a deeper pitch mix. And I do think like the problem is, and I think we see this a lot with pitchers, and it's not that you can't be dominant because, like, for instance, Dylan Cease can come out and his fastball's pumping and the slider's just nasty, right? He's just going to dominate 1-2 just with that 1-2 punch just over and over and over, right? However, if the slider's off, he's going to struggle. If the fastball's off, he's definitely going to struggle. Where you have these guys that have multiple pitches, like you remember, I mean, for Padres fans, it's more for Padres fans, I feel like, than anyone else. But Blake Snell's like, oh, I got to put the changeup on timeout, right? Like he had that whole thing, and then like he started heating up a little bit. Well, I think it's the same thing where it's like if you're Michael King and you can't throw the sweeper today, you can still go to other pitches. Dylan Cease, he doesn't pitch like that, and that's why you hear about that talked about so much. And like for instance, another guy, Roki Sasaki, people are talking about Roki Sasaki so much. He has his splitter that's like basically like a knuckleball. It's just absolutely absurd, right? He has a fastball that's been really, really high velo, but it struggled a little bit last year. Well, the criticism was like, you only have the 2 pitches. He might have the best pitch in the league with that splitter. Like it might end up being that good, but he needs to have a very consistent fastball to start. And he's trying to develop a slider. He needs to be able to develop the slider a little bit. Does he have to throw it 20% of the time? No, but it's got to be a pitch that's really solid there. Now, Dylan Cease does throw a couple other pitches, but he just barely throws them. Curveball 8% of the time, sweeper 4%, changeup 1%, cutter 1%. So it's like for him, he's throwing. He does have a couple other pitches in the mix, but it's like he's primarily a 2-pitch guy, and I think that's part of the reason why we see the ups and downs with him. Where for some pitchers, like you don't feel that as much. Like obviously, I think Darvish is a good example of that. Like he's a lot more consistent guy that I'll give you a sneak peek and I'll see what you're thinking about this, Isaac. Guy we're talking about tomorrow, where if the Padres were to trade Dylan Cease, what we would like to see is, and it doesn't have to be this guy exactly, but the makeup of this guy, Sandy Alcantara. Sandy Alcantara throws 4 or 5 pitches. I think he has a 4-pitch mix, and it's pretty even across the board. That dude goes deep in the games. He pitches a lot. He gets a lot of chase, like a really high chase percentage. And he's coming off Tommy John. There's definitely some question marks with him, but he's consistent. You know what I mean? Even with Blake Snell, when we talk about Blake Snell, he wasn't like consistent if he looked like the starts throughout the year, but he was consistent because he sucks at the beginning of the year and then he gets hot at the end. That's why he's been known to be a pitcher. So
Very true.
and this isn't like the thing. Another thing is like with this, like what you brought up the playoffs with Dylan Cease, bro. If if
Very
the playoffs come in and Dylan Cease is pumping, we might be saying the opposite thing. Whether this is Padres fans or other fans. So that's the thing. Like we talk about, like, yeah, he struggled in the playoffs. Like, yeah, because he was struggling at that time. If the sliders on, the fastball's on, maybe he goes 8 scoreless. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing. But it's like it's tough when you get into these do or die games where Darvish might not have one of his pitches or a couple of his pitches, but like Darvish is going to give you a solid outing. Like he's like that. And I know Darvish has Darvish has the infamous Game 7 or whatever, but they were tipping his pitches, man. Like that's kind of the whole thing with Darvish, right? It's like you never know what's coming, and then you're tipping. It's the worst guy to do that too. So I think that's a thing where it's like you're looking. It's like there's a reason that there are inconsistencies. It's just his style of play, Like and that's maybe people disagree. That's totally fine, but that's why ultimately I would rather them keep Michael King. And I think if there's a way for them to trade Dylan Cease, go get another starter that's similar. I like Sandy Alcantara because he has 2 more years after this year of his deal. You might open that window a little bit longer. Where if the Padres lose Dylan Cease and Michael King this offseason, they're gonna be in a scary spot. Like that's just the reality. So I don't know. That's where I'm at, but I don't know. What are you thinking?
No, I mean, of course, it makes a lot of sense, and this isn't to necessarily downplay what Dylan Cease has done throughout his career. He's had a good career. 2022, he had a 2.2 ERA. He was fantastic. This year, he had under 4 ERA. I forgot what it was. Let me see. I think it was like a 3.6. He had a 3.47 ERA this past year. So, nonetheless, still pretty high end numbers. Still top of the rotation numbers. It's just I don't know how much sense it makes for a team that seems like they want to stay at a certain number to keep a guy that's going to push them not over the number this year, but if they want to keep him, they're going to push him over the number next year. So this is kind of one of those things. It's very similar to Juan Soto, right? Juan Soto, he had the highest arbitration numbers, I think it was ever. So that was going to be added to the payroll. But then if you wanted to keep him after, you were going to have to pay him what the Mets paid him. And that just wasn't realistic for a team like the Padres who, yeah, when Peter was here, it seemed like, hey, the Padres can go get whoever they want. But now with new management, new ownership, seems like the Padres are set on a specific number, and that's kind of right around the luxury tax. And unfortunately, that's where they're at right now. So let's say with next year, these guys are going to get more expensive. It might end up becoming, who do you want to keep? Do you want to keep Michael King or do you want to keep Dylan Cease? And I think it's very important to extend Michael King right now. That's just my opinion, but I know there's going to be people that have differing opinions saying, well, Dylan Cease has the longevity throughout his career. He's finished top 5 in Cy Young twice at this point. So I completely understand the argument. But Michael King had a better year last year. Michael King had good playoff starts. Outside of one Grand Slam, pretty good playoff starts. I like Michael King a lot, man. He has a great pitch mix. His sweeper and slider, whatever you want to call it, it moves so much. Whereas, Dylan Cease, yeah, he has a lot of pitches, but he only primarily throws 2. Nonetheless, he's a great pitcher. I really enjoyed watching Dylan Cease's starts. Most of the time, definitely not Game 4, but Yeah, it just makes a lot of sense. And then you go look at the guy that's going to be talked about tomorrow. I'll pull up his savant right now and show his numbers from his. I think he won the Cy Young in this year, 2022. Yeah, he won the Cy Young. Um, I mean, he was fantastic, and he has a four pitch mix: changeup, four seam, sinker, slider. You see the monthly splits. He was never above a 3 ERA that year. He was fantastic, man. He was a really, really good pitcher that year. And I know the only knock on him is that he doesn't really strike out a lot of guys, and that's fair. You know, it's fair if you want to hold that against him. But if you bring him to a ballpark like Petco Park, it doesn't really seem like there's a need to strike out a lot of guys because you're playing in a hitter friendly ball or a pitcher friendly ballpark where the ball doesn't really fly in the first place. So it's definitely a benefit to Alcantara. So the only way I'm okay with trading Dylan Cease is if you get somebody like this. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. But in this case, in the case the scenario we're discussing right now, makes all the sense in the world, man. And you know, a trade partner that you could look at right now for Dylan Cease is probably the Yankees. The Yankees have a dilemma with Garrett Cole, who went down with Tommy John. He's gonna have Tommy John surgery. Um, so now they have Freed, Rodon, still a good rotation, but I'm sure they would like to add one more, or at least replace the production of Garrett Cole. So that's another trade part. That's a good trade partner. I don't really know of any other trade partners off the top of my head right now. I'd have to look at rosters, but um, yeah, in essence, like, you know, summarize what we're saying. Makes sense to trade Dylan Cease because he's only on 1 year deal. The production's inconsistent, but when you're getting good production, you're getting top of the rotation stuff. So, in my opinion, it's not that I want to trade Dylan Cease because of his production. He gives you good production, not every month, not from start to start, but when he's on, he's giving you top of the rotation stuff. However, he's on a 1 year deal, and these pitchers go for a lot of money now. And I definitely think we're looking at more than what he's estimated to make. So I'm thinking around 30 million a year for Dylan Cease because of the name, because of two top five Cy Young finishes, and if he produces again the way he did last year, he's definitely making a good chunk of change. King will be cheaper. Alcantara will be cheaper in the future. It does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what I think. I feel like that's like the take. It's not like Padres need to go trade Dylan Cease. Like who was it? There was a main report that was like Padres fire sale. It's like, really, bro? They're having a fire
That's not
sale?
happening.
I don't
Yeah,
think that's happening, man. Also, like, it's not like they're just gonna trade Cease and just like do nothing and sit on their hands. Like, no, if they trade Cease, they have to go make another move. So I'm interested to see what happens, man. But yeah, I think that's kind of our thoughts on him. And I think that's the take. If you're gonna trade Dylan Cease, you need to get a good amount of prospect capital, right? And you need to go make a corresponding trade. If you're not able to make a corresponding trade, that's a weird move. That's a
yep.
really odd move. Like, you need to find a way. And I think with this too, and Chase and I tomorrow, that's the video, right? We're gonna talk about Alcantara a bunch. So I won't get too much into him on what I think, but you're moving the window up. Like, that's the biggest thing. It's like you're adding prospect capital. That's the thing. Like, if you can add some prospect capital and then go and still get a similar guy, that makes a lot of sense. Dylan Cease has value this year, a lot of value. In terms of guys on 1 year deals, like, he has a ton.
Yeah.
Maybe they make this move during the trade deadline too. Like, that makes a lot of sense. Even
That'll
if
make a lot of sense.
they're like, we can trade him here and we can go get this arm right here. And then they go and they make the move and they trade him. And you look at it and you go, and maybe it's not Alcantara, maybe someone's totally different. But you're like, they got more prospect capital and they got a similar player. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing. And also the other thing is with that is like, maybe they're like, Musgrove's back in a month, the trade deadline. Maybe that's, maybe that's the thought.
Yeah.
Maybe you're looking, you're like, the rotation's healthy, all this stuff's going on. So I don't know, man. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Like I said, I'll be going live before the game on Thursday. Exciting stuff, dude. We got baseball in a few days now.
Hell yeah.
So I'm looking forward to it. But thank you all for listening. Have a good one and talk to you soon.